Greetings, greetings, greetings. Thank you so much for watching the Pastor G show. My name is Lindani Gumede, also known as Pastor G. And so today we're going to be talking about something that is quite sensitive. We are going to be talking about church trauma, church hurt, church trauma. And I must say from the onset that this is not a gossip session. Let me lay it down properly. Like, I have experienced church trauma and church hurt, but this video is really not about a gossip session of what happened, and I'm not going to name and shame because these individuals have families, and so I do not want to do that. But I'm going to be briefly sharing on the consequence of the church trauma that happened to myself and my lovely wife. But I'm also going to share on the reality that I am also responsible for church hurt or church trauma towards congregants, or there's a specific family that I know for sure that I have caused church hurt towards them. And so I'll briefly share that reality and that story as well. And then also I'd like to share on the reality that actually church leaders are also experience trauma as well. And when the church leader does not deal with the trauma, the result is that they can also hurt the congregants as well. Sometimes unbeknown to them that they are experiencing some hurts, and that they probably do not know what it might be. And then as a result, they begin to distrust, and they also cause a lot of hurt to other congregants as well. So I'm going to briefly share on that. I'm also going to conclude with something called destructive entitlement. So there's a lot to share on this topic. I cannot touch on everything. And the reality is that I do know of people who also have experienced church trauma and church hurt. And it is one of the most painful things to experience. It is so painful, because it's a combination. In the church, it can be a combination of a lot of things. It can be a combination of emotional, psychological, and also spiritual trauma, spiritual abuse as well. It happens. And when you are abused when you're abused spiritually, my goodness, it's detrimental, because from your spirit comes life. It comes, that's where mentally you become, or the spirit carries a lot of wealth in it. And so when you find spiritually, it can influence your mental well-being, it influences your emotional well-being, it influences your physical well-being as well. When you find spiritually, it can also influence your economical well-being as well. But when you destroy someone, even in the spiritual element, and you destroy their spirit, yay, it can be detrimental. So, as I briefly shared, I had experienced church trauma, and not only me, but it was myself and my wife as well. And it's a guilt that I had to deal with, and I had to exonerate. I had to remove the guilt off me, because my career and my job caused my wife to experience severe church trauma, which resulted in a lot of other things as well. And so, yeah, we had experienced traumas from church leadership for various reasons that one day they would maybe one day share. But it can be for various reasons. It can be various reasons. And it resulted in the reality of two choices. It's either I leave the church or I have to leave my marriage. That's the point where it got. And I valued my marriage a lot, and I chose then to leave the church. And the consequence of that is that it resulted in me not wanting to serve in a church for the entire year. There was a church that was interested in having me to serve, we came for 3 months for them to assess to see if I'd be part of the team. 3 months became 6 months, and after the 6 months, they were like, "Hey, we'd love for you to join the team," and I was like, "No, it's not you, it's me. It's not you, it's me. I need to deal with my hurts because I know that I'm hurting, and if I don't deal with this hurt, I'm gonna cause pain to the congregants as well." So for the whole year, I was not doing my calling. I was not living in my calling to be umfundisi, to be a pastor. And for that whole year, I had to grapple with this concept of forgiveness. And I did a course called the Freedom Course. And when I did that Freedom Course, it came to the point where it challenges you on forgiveness. And I had to grapple with forgiveness and the pain that was caused to my wife and I. And not only my wife and I, the secondary trauma of seeing the pain that was caused to congregants as well. And questioning whether it is even fair. Is it fair? Is it fair to forgive? Is it fair that this is what's happening in our modern day world, that people in churches are experiencing a lot of hurts and traumas? And eventually I got to a point where I had to forgive, and I had to let go, and I had to release the pain, and I had to forgive. And I also got to a point where I also need to acknowledge my part of the story and my part of where I caused pain. And so one day, after the whole year of grappling with forgiveness, towards the end of the year, I went to meet with this individual, this specific leader who had caused so much pain and hurt towards myself and my family. And I had to humble myself and say, "Hey, I am sorry for my contribution towards the hurt." We spoke about what had happened, and I had to humble myself and say, "Hey, I'm sorry for what I have contributed in hurt." The leader was really taken aback, he mentioned to me that he is the one who is supposed to be expressing forgiveness, and he was taken aback, honestly, and he asked for forgiveness as well. If I can call him, I can still call him, and we can still have a good chat. But the reality is that it did cause a lot of pain. It resulted in me having to go, and my wife having to go for therapy. We had to go for various therapy sessions. As I said, it resulted in me not wanting to be part of the church for the whole year. I was really hoping to not even go back into church and into ministry. But the grace of the Lord was like, "Yay, bro, I want you to serve in the church. That is where I want you to be." So the benefits, I guess, of it let me rather quickly also share, as I said, there was various consequences as well. Even to our marriage as well, there was consequences as well. And I possibly share this because I am aware that there are people who go through church trauma, and it even has an effect on your children and on your spouse as well, and on your marriage as well. Some people would go through some church hurts and church traumas that they can't even share with their spouses because they are enjoying church, but then there is a direct what's the word I'm looking for? There's direct tension or pain that is coming from leadership directly to the person who is maybe in the executive of the church, and the family are just normal church members and they're enjoying the church, but this one individual is experiencing a lot of pain and hurt that's coming from leadership. And how do you balance that my family is loving the church, but I want to leave the church because I'm experiencing this hurt, and if I express this to my family members, something might happen. We're not sure, someone's gonna kill somebody, So it is something that is really, really of great concern. And yeah, I just want to share it with those who are going through church hurt, those who have gone through church hurt. I want to say, I am sorry. I am so sorry for what you have gone through. I'm sorry for the pain that you've experienced. I am so sorry. I'm so sorry. And I hope that you get to a point in your life where you can forgive and release the pain and release that pain to the Lord, and that you would forgive and that you'd go on a journey of healing. Whew. The second part of the video is that I myself, as a leader in the church, had caused a family to have experienced great pain. And it came from receiving external information from someone in the church who was quite high in the church, and they shared some stories of this family members, and they were telling us, beware of this family members, and they were part of the ministry that I was involved in. And so I was extra cautious when it came to this family. And it came to a point where I was even, whenever there was just an opportunity to scrutinize, I would scrutinize. Whenever there was an opportunity to look for something to pin them on, I would do so. And it became really, really quite bad and unhealthy. And I must say that the mother in the family was constantly gracious and constantly kind towards me. And I guess we got to a point where we met with the family, and I just wanted to hear the family story, And as I heard the family story, I began to see that, wow, what an amazing family they are. And actually, we are prevented from building a relationship with this family because of what they know about somebody who is high up in church leadership. They were chilled. They were fine. It's not as if they were going to pin that person. They were fine. But I realized that our relationship, I could have built an amazing relationship with this family a long time ago, but that didn't happen because of misinformation. Because of that misinformation, it resulted in me causing hurt towards that family, towards the children in that family. And I had to go to the family and say, listen, this is what I heard about you guys, and I'm so sorry for mistreating you guys when you did not deserve that. Now that I know your side of the story, I can actually see, Oguti, what is happening, and my eyes were open, and I'm so sorry for that. So it is possible for church leaders to cause hurt. I know for sure that I have caused hurt towards a family member, and possibly unknown to me, there is a possibility that I've possibly also caused hurt to individuals who maybe were not brave enough to come to me and say, listen, bro, pastor, you know what? You hurt me, bro, And so I need to be humble as well, that when people do approach me to say, yo man, this is what you did, and it was quite offensive, for me to be understanding and to be able to say I am sorry. The beauty of, I guess, the pain that I had experienced and my wife had experienced is that it led me to want to study more. It led me to want to understand more on trauma. I wanted to understand more on trauma and to understand the psychological element of the brain, and when it comes to healing, how do we contribute to wholeness when it comes to healing, in the healing aspect, and it resulted in me pursuing my honors degree with a focus on trauma, and then getting my master's degree with the clinical pastoral care, focusing on clinical work, and just really understanding, psychology on a deeper level. And I guess that's the benefit of maybe the hurt that we had gone through, because when I had met the therapist who was helping us out, I was like, yo, this person is helping me so much. And I feel like as a church, I need to be careful, but I feel like as a church, or as pastors in the church, we are not as equipped to deal with people who are going through various hurts and to counsel people well. When you go to theology school, to seminary, they teach you various elements, when it comes to the Bible, when it comes to church history, church organization. But once you go to postgrad, that's when you can maybe focus on the element of counseling, if you want to. But I do tend to feel like as leaders, we need to be a bit more equipped when it comes to the counseling element. I'm aware that there are NGO churches that actually have social workers that are employed within the church. And those social workers or counselors are the ones who deal with the counseling element of congregants in the church. I'm aware that even in our church, we have an external person who does counseling for congregants as well. And so it's quite healthy to have maybe someone who can deal with that. But it's also good to be equipped. And I guess my journey of studying helped me to realize a few things. It helped me to realize where I had gone wrong, but it also made me realize what might be the reality of the individual who caused hurt. It challenged me to stand behind the seat of even someone who was guilty, or even someone who is an offender. You have to stand behind their seat and hear their story as well. So that's one of the positives. But I briefly share that because I am going to share on something that is interesting that I learned through my studies. And what I learned through my studies is also that church leaders deal with trauma and hurt themselves. I had realized or learned that there's something called big T trauma and small t trauma. Big T trauma can be a volcano erupting, an earthquake that happens that can cause devastation, a flooding that happens that can cause devastation. When the tsunami happened, that is like a whole big T trauma in and of itself. And then there's also something called small t trauma. Small t traumas can be something as small as neglect, something as small as rejection, something as small as loss. When you lose a friend, when you lose a loved one, that's also traumatic. And the small t traumas are the most detrimental traumas. They can cause the most severe damage. I was privileged in my honors year to do a study on trauma, and I wanted to understand homelessness and trauma. And I thought that the people who experience homelessness, who are on the streets, I thought that the trauma comes from the streets, but actually I realized that the trauma was something as small as neglect or rejection or loss. And those small t traumas resulted in them being on the streets. Yeah. And I got to realize that actually a lot of people are dealing with small t traumas that need help, and maybe when it comes to even the element of preaching, that we need to even deal with those small t traumas to help congregants who might be dealing with that. But I realized that also church leaders also deal with small t traumas, because they also deal at times with neglect from church congregants. At times they have to deal with rejection. And at times they have to deal with loss when congregants pass away, when close friends pass away, or even when congregants choose to go to a different church and they lose congregants That is a small t trauma as well. And that can cause great hurt. And the reality is that sometimes the church leader might not know that they are going through this small t trauma. And when you don't know it, you can think that everything is fine, but then you don't realize that you're slowly beginning to distrust people, and you're slowly beginning to take out your hurt on innocent parties, innocent people who have done nothing. We are, people might join the church and they might be new to the church, and they want to build relationship, but then there's this wall, there's this resistance, there's this distrust, because you want to build maybe trust first, but there's this whole distrust, and it's more like, let me see your wrongs first before I can have a relationship with you, because I've been hurt so many times that I do not want to get to a point where I want to be vulnerable with you. And so there is that reality, and there is a reality that as church leaders, if we don't recognize that we've been hurt in some way or another, and we don't deal with that hurt, that we can also hurt other people as well. Shoo. All right, my last one is something called destructive entitlement. So in my master's year, we dealt with an amazing book called Encouraging Encounters from Prof. Nel van Doren, Reframing Time by Dialogue in the Intergenerational Pastoral Process. And this book is absolutely amazing, and we focus on a family therapist called Naj, Ivan Bosameni Naj, and we dealt with quite a lot of things. One of the things that we dealt with is something called entitlement. So I'm going to share on entitlement, I'm going to share on constructive entitlement and destructive entitlement. So entitlement, or let me rather say, in a relationship, there's always the give and take. Every relationship has an element of giving and receiving, or giving and taking. And so entitlement is also referred to the right to give. It's the right to give. And when there is recognition or acknowledgement for your giving, it leads to more constructive entitlement. And so I want to give even more in a constructive way because you have acknowledged my giving. And so of recent, my son, I came with a grocery bag, I put it on the table, and I slowly start unpacking things and putting them in the fridge and the cupboards. And unfortunately, the grocery bag fell. And I was like, "Arr!" And my son was standing next to the table. He goes to the grocery bag that had fallen. He picks it up. He brings it to me, and I take the grocery bag, put it on the table, and I say, "Thank you so much, my son. I so appreciate it. Give me a high five." And I give him a high five. He gives me a high five, and I say, "Thank you." So his giving in that situation was acknowledging that, okay, this has possibly, caused my dad to be slightly upset that, something fell and, something could have broken inside the plastic bag that fell. But then he responds by picking up the plastic bag and giving it to me. That is giving in a relationship. And I respond by acknowledging that giving, by recognizing and acknowledging that giving, by saying, "Wow, thank you for that, my boy. Give me a high five." And I acknowledge that, and with the hope that it will lead to more constructive entitlement, constructive giving. Then, if our giving is not recognized and not acknowledged, it can result to becoming more destructive. And it can result into what we call destructive entitlement. So this is when there's no recognition for your giving. And I believe that at times pastors do receive affirmation, and I think we shouldn't be preaching for affirmation. We should be preaching from affirmation, knowing that God says, this is my son whom I love, whom I'm well pleased. This is my daughter whom I love and I'm well pleased. And so we preach from a point where we know that we are chosen by God, we love by God, that God is proud of us, and we've received that affirmation before we go on the pulpit to preach. And so there is times that even after preaching and after giving in the weekend, that congregants would come and say, Pastor, thank you so much for that. And they recognize the giving, they recognize and they acknowledge that giving element from the pastor as well. But it's also possible that at times that congregants do not maybe see the giving that comes from the pastor. And when there's no acknowledgement from that giving, it can result in what we call destructive entitlement, where the pastor becomes a bit more destructive because he's not recognized for his giving. So how does he become destructive? There's various ways. It can be internal. There can be an internal implosion where he becomes or she becomes depressed or suicidal, or even have feelings like I'm not good enough, and so I have to constantly do things to prove myself because I'm not good enough, so it can get to the point where you feel like you're not good enough and you become hyper responsible and you want to do everything by yourself instead of delegating. And maybe that comes from a feeling of you're not good enough. Some, as I said, would begin to experience depression, suicidal feelings, and feelings of anger, because anger is a secondary emotion, but feelings of anger and disappointment and mistrust as well. So it can become internal, but also it can also become external as well. Destructive entitlement can be also where the congregants begin to feel the consequences and the effects of them not giving acknowledgement. And that possibly could be in various ways. It could be in various ways. Could be in, I don't even want to mention it, but it could be in various elements where money, where the pastor can feel like, he has a right to more money, or he has a right to more whatever, and a right to maybe not be accountable or held accountable. There's various other external things that can happen, and both of them can be quite dangerous. Whether you take it out on the congregants or whether you take it out on yourself, it can be very dangerous. So that's a little bit on destructive entitlement. And it even happens not only in churches, but it also happens in families as well. When family members, when children do not receive recognition and acknowledgement for their giving, that they seek it in destructive ways. So they become destructive, they become naughty, because that's when you give them attention. But if they, and that attention is received in a destructive way, because yes, you're giving them attention, but then maybe, you might give them a smack and you can say, okay, come here, I'm sorry, and you give them a hug and you just pat them. That might be soothing for them, but they've also yearned for that for a long time. And so, that is destructive, and I guess it's something that we can learn in our families as well, that, when our kids or our spouses give in some way or another, to acknowledge that and to say, thank you, I see that, I see what you've done, and I appreciate it. And it can result even into more constructive entitlement. So yes, all right, that's all I gotta share. That's all that I have. If you have any questions when it comes to church trauma, or if you want me to maybe deal with it in a different perspective, in a different way, please hit me up in the comments. If you have my numbers, WhatsApp me, let me know what else I can share on when it comes to maybe this topic of church trauma. As I said, it is quite broad. I cannot touch on everything, but if there is some element that you'd want me to touch on, let me know and let's see how we can do that. So yeah, thank you so much for watching the video thus far. I really appreciate it, and I acknowledge that you would spend time to just watch this video. I want to say thank you. Thank you for watching all the other shows that I do produce, and I just want to say thank you. Well, I hope you have an amazing day.